Hey, what's up everybody? Rob here from Ram Studio Comics. So in today's video, I want to talk to you about using hatching and cross-hatching, but in a kind of messier way. So I think a lot of times we try to draw everything all clean and pristine for comics, and although that is like what you might want to do for your own particular style, for beginners, I want you to understand that first you just really want to get comfortable with conveying shadow, light and dark, and you can be a bit messy about that. And then as you find your style and you figure out where you want to really refine things, by all means, go ahead. But so what I'm going to do here is just quickly draw in an eye. So you can draw in your own eye, screen grab this one, whatever you want to do. But I'm not trying to make some perfect eye either. I just want to show you, or have a starting point to show you what I want to show you. So simply put, hatching is when you go in one direction. Cross hatching is when you go in another direction. And I don't know if there's a term for more cross hatching, but generally I won't just go in two directions. I'll go in multiple directions. But it really depends on what I'm after. If I'm after a cleaner, more refined comic look, then I might use tapered lines like this. So I'm just bearing down and getting a thicker line and then letting off and getting a point. And I might do that in a crosshatch way. So in those cases, I will just usually go with a crisscross, diagonal lines. But I'm not going to do that here. I want to show you more of the thought process in which I think you should practice and experiment. So I'm going to scale this up a little bit. And let's just go ahead and start inking over this. And, we might make a few lines solid, like the top eyelid, some drop shadow into the eye, inside of the eye, things like that. But what I really want to do is show you how you can start to develop, some form here. So, first you want to think about your light source. So I'm going to just let me draw it with a red, just to show you what I'm thinking about with light source as I go to do this. Because you got to be conscious of the things that you're going to implement, or it's always going to look mucky and unprofessional. So I'm going to throw in a shadow here. So a little bit darker shadow here. I haven't decided on the eyelid, but I'm going to shade some of that in, maybe all of it, something like that. Actually, I'll blend it. That's what I'll do. So it'll look like it's all shaded into here, but it's going to be a little bit different tone. I'm going to do a drop shadow on the eye. I'm going to put a glare right through that drop shadow. And I'm going to do a little bit of shading down here, maybe here, I don't know about there, and some through here. So I'm trying to show you lighter lines too. So this is going to be heavier, this will be lighter. I'm going to edge out the iris. So little things like that. I might even do a little bit of shadow there because, we got to always remember there's, the white of the eye is never all white, right? There's shading all through here. So let's just say something like that. It's a bit messy, but that's my concept for shading. Now, obviously working digitally, I could leave that in place and make my life a lot easier. But yeah, I know what I'm going to do with it. I'm just going to jump over to here and start inking. So I guess I will add one layer just so I can hedge off any mistakes and show you, so I don't lose the immediate form, the initial form that I put down. So what I'm going to do now is start just dropping in some lines. And I want to show you that these don't have to be that clean. That's kind of the main exercise that I want to do here. I want to show you that, yes, you can put these really clean lines in, especially as you get more confident in what you're doing and you're basically trying to implement more style and, more technique. But in the beginning, I think it's helpful to just practice doing this without worrying about this being so precise. And again, I'm thinking more about the gradient that I'm trying to achieve and the fade and the blend and things like that. I'm not thinking about perfect lines. I am trying to keep them relatively close in succession, as they're parallel, maybe not being creating too much variation in there, but that's about it. And then the darker I want to go, the more I'm going to try to crisscross these. And it's going to get a little bit messy. And remember too, the other way you're going to create shadow is you're going to bring these tighter together. So even though these are all the same line, I can convey a deeper shadow with more of them, you know, cross-hatched obviously, but also just bringing them tighter together. And then as I get darker and darker into this area, I just have to find a different angle to do that. And you start getting these tiny little diamonds in there, which I think look kind of neat. But again, I'm just trying to continue adding this until I get the tone that I want. And then as I bring it out this way, I might purposely widen these a bit. In fact, the other way you can create this gradation is as it gets to the light source, you can do basically what a horizon looks like. Something like that. Or the, you know, horizon effect, where something's tighter together and then it loosens up and fades out as it comes out to the viewer. So there's a bit of shading just for that area. Now what I want to do here with the eye, same thing. I want to shade this back, but I just want it to be a little bit different than this shadow up there. And I also want to change the shape of this shadow a little bit. So I'm going to keep adding some line breaks to kind of to do that. I still feel like this needs to be a little bit darker. Now I can also use some heavier lines throughout this and convey that more quickly, but I'm going to try to really fight that because I feel like that kind of goes into what I was mentioning before about as you start to develop your style, you're going to create more like comic style rendering where you use a lot more tapered lines and things like that. I really just want to show you that at this stage you can really just use these thin lines. It's almost like you know, the way old print media was and stuff like that, and how they would I think they used carvings to make all the prints, if I'm not mistaken, but long time ago. But that's where you see like the engraved look, you know, the look of money, things like that. It's just very neat how it's, you know, it was designed. So here I want this to be darker. I might even bring this to black, but I'm actually just going to start by darkening this in, because, you know, we can always throw in black at the very end if this doesn't read as dark as we really hoped. So something like that. Again, just kind of crisscrossing these lines, not worrying about clarity. Sometimes I'll try to move so fast that I'll start to actually scribble some of this in. Here I can use heavier lines. Now the way I'm working, generally I'm going to get a little bit of taper every time I implement a heavier line, even though I'm not really intending to do that. I really just want to fill this in, but just in that one spot I'm going to use a little bit more tapered lines. Now the other thing you can think about is curvature as well. So as you start to shade around the eye here, I'm going to try to keep these relatively straight, but there's a lot of times when I'm doing an iris, I'll purposely curve these lines just to help convey the sense of you know, of curve and depth of the iris. So just, you know, be aware that's another way to use these lines and make more enriched kind of feeling to the illustration. So also I want a little bit of gradation this way. So I'm going to bring that down. So I want that heavier line to show the drop shadow from the brow, but then I want a little bit more gradation this way. I might bring this, you know, diagonal, or what is that, perpendicular? And let's see what else. Maybe some this way. Again, just trying to blend this around and get a feeling of a rounded form here. Now the other thing I like to do, this iris is going to be darker than the white of the eye. So what I probably should even started with is just going right through all of this. And I can even widen these out to the middle and then tighten these up on the edge a little bit. And again, that's still going to help convey a little bit more of a rounded feel. And the darker I feel the iris is going to be to the white of the eye, I just continue that on. But I'm just going to leave it there for now. And I do want a little bit of shading on the white of the eye as well, because again, it's never truly white. So even in our line work, we want to think about that. We want to think about some of the roundedness you get this way as well. And again, I think I said I wanted some shading over here. We'll get that in. You know, notice that I'm running these lines any direction I want, really. I'm not really too concerned with them being a specific direction. Now, maybe that's wrong by some people's standards. You know, maybe there is a method of madness there, but I really just feel like I want to be more creative with the way I implement these lines. So I'm allowing myself, you know, some leniency there. And through that, I generally feel like I get a little bit more creative in the moment than if I worried too much about everything being, you know, overly designed, overly structured. I think in some areas I could be a lot messier than what I'm really going for right now, but this is actually messy to me, so just so you know. Okay, something like that. But I really feel this is a helpful practice activity and something that leads up into you know, doing your comic art illustration more effectively, because there's certain areas where you want the variation. You want maybe some areas that are nice and clean and rendered in precise detail, but then maybe you have a panel where it's a dreamscape and there's something, you know, a little foggy going on, or a thought back into their past, and you purposely do a different inking style. There's lots of ways to really think about this and utilize this to get the best out of your work, to get more range out of your work. Now for up here, I'm sure I could use a lot of little thin lines and even use gradation to get this, but I'm just going to kind of use some feathered lines, get some of these hairs going, you know. But it doesn't mean I can't combine that as well. I could do something like this, and then I could get back in here with some cross hatching, and I could shade this back. You see, I'm just basically scribbling right through there. I want it darker here, so I bring those tighter in succession. Okay, and again, I might go back to this edge and feather some of these lines. I really just want the sides of the iris to be darker. So I'm just gonna add these tiny little spikes to the side. I could go back in the other direction and cross hatch. Now I also wanted a glare right through here, so I'm actually just gonna draw this shape in. I want this big kind of animated glare, maybe not so animated, but just a glare right through here. I actually want that to go up into the shadow there, so I'm going to switch this to translucent, and I'm just going to erase this back, maybe leave little bits and pieces of it. Maybe not, maybe just make it a nice strong glare, maybe a glare over here. Oh, that's actually combined with the other ones, something like that. So just so I get a little bit of the kind of wet look to the eye. And I could even erase some of these lines back the other way. So this is another fun way to soften things up. You know, if you go too far, you can always use a translucent and go back, or white out. And you can do lots of neat little effects that way. Soften up some of these edges, create some little highlights in the hair, you know, whatever. So just like that, we're starting to get there. Now the other thing I like to do is pan back and make sure that it reads like shadows, like shading, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. So sometimes you can be too close to the work and kind of lose that feeling, you know, that dimensional vibe that you're trying to create. So let's go ahead and let's add a little bit of shadow on the bottom of the eye. So again, this is a rounded form that we're trying to create. And let's see, let's do a little bit of separation back here. I also want to create little bits of you know, some wrinkles and some different edges that way. I really want the edge of that eye. So this is a little bit more realistic. And again, still trying to get some of that shading. I think I want this side of the iris to be darker, so I'll add some more lines over here. Some spaced lines, just a little bit of curve. Now, you can probably see I haven't incorporated a whole lot of curved lines into this, if any, hardly any, but maybe some around the iris. But I guess some of these are curved, but they're pretty much straight. But as they start to pull together, they can very much read like curves. You know, very much read like rounded forms and shapes, and that's kind of the neat thing about it. So it's really just the way that you overlap it, but it's keeping in mind the dimensional aspect of what you're trying to create. As long as you keep thinking about that as you pick at this and add to it, generally you're going to retain that. Generally you're going to get that dimensional feel. It does take practice, but it's very very fun to do. I always feel like this is a great way to kind of loosen up and, you know, get ready for doing my comic art, you know, because it feels like you're scribbling. And as you always hear me say on the channel here, I feel like scribbles is where the ideas happen. It's the idea stage of the work. So scribble often and enjoy that. I don't try to make everything a perfect illustration every time. It's frustrating, I think, to me anyways. So that's really about it. I just wanted to give you an exercise to try, you know, play around with this, expand the idea, you know, use it in your own style, try a variety of lines. You know, you could really get in here. Now, traditionally, I'm going to use a lot more tapered lines, and, you know, you've probably seen my work. I get in there and do a lot of line variation and things like that. But it kind of starts here. So the thought process is try to create form, try to create depth, you know, the illusion of depth on a 2D surface. Do that with these basic lines and crisscrossing and cross-hatching and allowing yourself to experiment. And then as you feel more confident with this, start to incorporate more enriched lines, you know, more tapered lines. But play around with this. I think it's a lot of fun. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. I'd love to know what you think in the comment section below. More content is on the way real soon. So as always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and bye for now.